Hey, welcome back to the Artie Lange Show in New Orleans with Andrew Zimmern from Bizarre Foods on the Travel Channel. Good man. And the great Joe Buck talking about Joe calling the series and quoting his father, something that, in the life of an American man, who else gets to do that? And I love seeing you because I always get a chance to do an impression of your father. And it's in the most respectful, way. This is your father. This specifically, I don't know why this sticks in my head, but this is the first pitch of the 1990 National League Championship Series. Pirates versus...
Reds.
The Reds, exactly. Pirates versus the Reds. This is Barry Larkin leading off. 1990 NLCS on CBS. Here's the first pitch. Larkin, fly ball left. Bonds is there. He's got it. That's the way this one starts. Timmy will give you the lineups.
And then Tim came in. Leading off is John Cangelosi.
But I love how your father was like the Godfather. He was like, Timmy will give you the lineups. Right. And the bit I used to do it in stand-up. The bit I used to do was a real man's man like your father being forced to do promos for some awful television that they would have. Fly ball left. He's there. That's the way this one starts tonight on CBS. Courtney and Chloe take Miami. Apparently, a couple of sisters, and they take Miami, Florida. I don't know where they take it, but yeah.
That's it.
Jake and the Fat Man.
The story about my dad, Snoop. I'm in a bar in New York, and I'm leaving, and he's coming in, and he's wearing this fur coat, and it has a certain odor to the fur coat.
Oh, yeah. But by the way, walking by one of his fur coats, you could fail a pee test.
Right. Yeah. So he's walking in. I say, hey, I'm a huge fan. I'm like, hey,
he's a good guy.
He's
Snoop,
a really good guy, and he's a huge sports fan. I
Right.
said, hey, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Joe Buck. I do the stuff on Fox. He goes, man, I know who you are. I even know who your dad was. He was cold. I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard in my life. He just called my dad cold.
Right. That's another thing that aggravated me about that appearance on your show. I did an impression of your father. People thought I was disrespecting your father. Like, I could not be more respectful about another human being in my life.
Well, I didn't.
Yeah, no, of course, exactly.
You just disrespected me. You son of a bitch.
That was what was the other bit I used to like doing? Tonight on CBS, Jake and the Fat Man solve a crime. I did that on Letterman because Letterman obviously loves your father,
right? Yeah,
and all the Midwestern stuff. But now, talk about you've become the voice for going into a second generation of both baseball and football nationally. You always get the big game, the national game. You do the Super Bowl once every few years. You get the series every year. I think I know the answer, but what do you like doing more? I'm sure it's baseball.
Well, it's a different. Yes, that's the answer, but football's so big, and therefore
it's the new national pastime.
Yeah, really. It's huge, and so when you do those games, you know that you're going to have a huge audience, and I love working with Troy. And I bought your CD. I know he's you've got a whole.
That's a true story, by the way. It's
right.
a true story. I just told the story about a Philadelphia Eagles fan, which can be harsh.
Yeah.
But no, you guys are fantastic.
Well,
together.
we're about the same age. We both have a couple girls. We have. I grew up. I bother him by saying this, but I grew up watching him. By the time I really cared about the NFL, I was aware of him, and he's a hard worker, and we get along. So that's fun. But football for me is. A play happens, how many yards, who made the catch, who made the tackle, what's the down and distance, I stop, Troy talks.
Baseball has great pauses that allow you to have fun.
The guy could foul off 10 pitches.
Right,
and it's what you do with those 10 pitches that makes you I think that's where you earn your money. Everybody can call a home run.
Right.
It's what goes on. That's why when people send in resume tapes, I'm like, send somebody. Don't just all highlight after highlight. Send somebody the downtime.
Yeah.
That's what tells you you're good.
There's a great moment at the beginning of Ken Burns' documentary, Baseball. They show a couple of plays from the history of baseball. And one of them is that great play Brooks Robinson made in the 70 World Series when Lee May hits the ground ball to the third base. And he makes that an insane play.
Yeah.
And he turns around and he throws it and it goes on one hop to Boog Powell and he gets the guy. And I don't know who the announcer was, but to me, it sums up baseball because on top of great pauses, there's great surprises in baseball, better than any other sport. It's real slow, like to where you could tell a story. Then something happens,
then
and you get to go nuts.
Yeah.
So that announcer, I forget what he was saying. He was like giving the weather or something. He's going like, unseasonably warm here for Cincinnati. It's October, and then he's like, here's the pitch to May, ground ball. Oh, what a play by Rob!
That's right.
Ground ball. Oh, what a play! I mean, and you get to have fun almost. Like you're a fan.
You do, and I get credit. My biggest critics are the ones that say, A, I don't love what I do, and I'm monotone and boring. And B, people say I'm smug and whatever. I got into this business because my dad did what he did.
Right.
I got in because of nepotism. There's no doubt about that.
Okay,
and I think when you do that, when you get in that way, you're almost still so reverent of you almost don't want to get in the way. And so the way I broadcast games, I will get excited when it calls for it. I get crap for the Tyree catch all the time in the Super Bowl.
People think you weren't excited about it.
Yeah, but I couldn't see it.
Yeah, first of all, I'm a Giant fan, and it was fine. It was great. You're letting the action happen. And
I don't want to be the moment. It's about what happened on the field.
Right.
And so there are different ways to do a game.
What do they want you to do?
No, they want me to pull a groin calling the thing.
No, honestly. I mean, Brent, can you relate to that? I mean, that's...
No. Absolutely.
Do you do baseball at all? Or
I've done a little bit, obviously, at a different level than what we're talking about with Joe. But, I think the thing that all of us are battling is exactly what Joe talked about with the tapes that he gets. And by the way, he's critiqued my stuff before. And laying out was the big thing I took from what you told me, is don't be afraid to just let the moment happen. And that's the one thing you constantly have to remember. The other thing is trying to develop a style that separates you, which you've done, obviously, and the rest of us out there are striving for, because all of us start to probably sound the same to the bosses out there.
Well, I think one of the reasons why is this is such a politically correct world. It forces everybody into this boring mainstream.
People are afraid to go outside.
Well, I mean, look what happened to Brent Musburger with the girlfriend of the quarterback.
Could it be a more mundane thing to get
the girls in beauty pageants?
Yeah, no kidding.
So, okay,
a guy can't say that?
So it forces
horrible.
everybody back to the middle of the street, and guys like Harry Carey, my dad, and who had so much personality and would say stories, and it was a different time. And, my dad, some of the stuff he said when he was rolling or doing rain delays, or they would laugh, they'd have fun.
Right.
You'd have Twitter would blow up. You'd be all over Deadspin, all that kind of stuff. And it's just a different world.
Phil Rizzuto, the Yankee announcer, was fantastic, and he said politically incorrect things all the time. Will Ferrell told me a great story about Harry Carey. He was listening to Harry Carey once, and I heard him say something similar in a rental car in Chicago once. He said, and talk about stuff you can't do anymore. But again, if you're a sophisticated person, you get that this is just funny to laugh at. You don't get Eddie Murphy said it the best. Nothing is offensive if it's funny, and this is something you could laugh at. But so Harry Carey said, if this guy wins 20 games, I'm a Chinaman.
Oh my God.
Or how about the time there was a pop-up on the infield, and
God
a guy who happened to be a Latino shortstop.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he misjudges it. Can't say, how does a guy from the Dominican not be able to see the ball in the sun?
That's all they have down there is sun. That's all they got.
Right. So I think because of all that, everybody, what Brent's talking about, it forces everybody back into this boring middle. And the minute you step out, you're going to get whacked.
Right.
And you got to be willing to get whacked and just carry on. And until the boss taps me on the shoulder, I'm going to keep doing it. And on Twitter and all that other stuff.
Don't even pay attention.
No, I don't.
As a
I don't
comic,
tweet.
The Twitter people call me up. I see Twitter. I'm like, no, I can't pay attention to that. I couldn't do my work if I did.
Started to for a while a year ago, and it started to work its way into my head. And I was starting to answer. When you start answering them, I only answered the ones that were blasting me. I didn't care. The ones that are like, hey, love your work.
That will eventually you'll unravel.
Right.
You'll become like Nicholson in The Shining.
Yeah, exactly. Hacking through a door. Here's Joey.
Here's Joey.
So that's how I felt, and I was doing these games, and it's like, I'm answering these people even in the way I'm doing the game, and I just have to do it and take it or leave it, and I'll live with what I say. And I love what I do. I grew up loving what I do.
You're always insanely prepared, too. You guys, you and Aikman, and of course McCarver, you're always so prepared. A guy who's an unsung hero who would let it happen, and this is a great thing I used to love doing with my buddies. Bob Murphy used to do Met games, okay?
Swinging a line drive.
Right, line drive. He used to do a great little thing, like an old guy thing, when another announcer would say, I'll tell you, Bob Gardenhire goes back on a pop-up really well. He goes, doesn't he, though? But I remember one time. This is how talk about letting it happen. This is what he said once. The Big Red Machine in the '70s. I'm a kid watching a Met game, and he goes, "Here's Bob Apodaca. Wheels, deals, rocks, kicks the offering. There's a line drive in the right center field. It's going to get by a diving Del Unser. Here comes a red." Here comes another red. The Mets are going to lose this one.
Oh, my God.
Here comes a red. Pause. Here comes another red. The Mets are going to lose. You know what else I found out, too, about your business? And I have it in comedy like crazy with jealousy. But I found out, because I was involved in your first show and I was reading everything about it, there were so many people in your business, man, rooting for you to fail. Oh, Joe, I felt so bad for you because there were guys, like guys who should have, I won't even say their names, but guys who should have more respect for the business and themselves, not to act like 2-year-olds, where they were going because of what I did, somehow they thought maybe it was bad for you, and you could tell they were relishing it.
Oh yeah, well I'm the guy who got into it because of a famous father.
Yeah, I'm
an easy target, but that's okay.
Yeah, I mean,
I get it.
Honestly, is it okay though?
It is. What are my options? That's all I got.
Right. Well, I mean, I was mad for you. People were like clearly rooting. And look, it happens in comedy all the time. There's 4 million comedians hoping I suck every day.
It's human nature. I found when I started, I got hired when I was 21. I was doing the Cardinal games, and there was a guy in St. Louis who's still there, and Brent knows him, Dan Caesar, who writes all the media stuff. He wrote an article the day I got hired that one of the paragraphs said, "What's most offensive about Joe Buck?" And it went on to say how many guys are struggling in the minor leagues. And he was right. And now here's this 21-year-old kid doing the games. So that was like a punch in the gut right when I started. And that doesn't really go away. And that's okay. I don't duck away from the fact that I'm my dad's kid.
But in a way, it makes what you do harder, though.
It makes does.
There's more pressure.
It did then.
You're 21 doing Cardinal games. It's almost like Bruce Springsteen's kids, putting out an album.
Right.
It's way harder for him. You meet a lot of rich kids in L.A. And I always had a thing against rich kids growing up. And my sponsor at AA actually told me this when I first started going there. He would tell me, because he was the greatest therapist, my first sponsor out there. He would tell me, you know how you can relate to these people and like them is you have to find somebody's struggle in life and know that everyone has one. And it doesn't matter rich, whatever, or if they're given something because of an opportunity. There's a struggle there. There's pressure for them on some level, and you'll like them because you'll get what they're trying to overcome.
Right.
And in a way, what you overcame is way more difficult than an unknown guy.
Well, in some ways, but it was also that's how I could start at 21. I grew up in that booth. I wasn't intimidated by that booth. I could do it, and I just slid over one chair. I was with Mike Shannon and my dad, so it was very comfortable, even at that ridiculously young age, to do it. When I went to Fox and I was doing a Yankees World Series at 27, that was a different story.
Right. You think about how far back you go already, man. I mean, that Yankee, the Jeter, A-Rod era here in baseball, 96, Charlie Hayes making the catch there. You've been, as long as Jeter's been a Yankee, you've been the voice of baseball.
Joe, I can't imagine how many times per day still, even though it's been 10 years since your father's passing, and people come up, not just his broadcast, people love the guy. Obviously, the stories came out in droves. He was the best guy, the best tipper. Everyone had you seem to embrace it. Like, you seem to be like, yeah, he was like the coolest guy ever.
He was my best friend. If I had animosity, he never shoved me into this business. He never told me what to do. He helped by his name, but he let me find my own way. And when we were on the air together, it was never a power thing for him. I only knew when I was going down the wrong path. Like if I was criticizing an umpire, he'd give me this look out of the corner of his eye as we were on the air, and I'd be like, all right.
He didn't like that.
I got to back off.
That was no...
And when he drove me to Louisville my first year when I was broadcasting in the minor leagues, he said, you got to realize you've watched big league baseball your whole life. Unless you think you could make that play 10 times out of 10 times, you can't criticize him because you never did this.
He was an old school respect guy. Yeah. See, I relate to that because my father was my best friend too. I mean, he climbed roofs for a living, and I sucked at that. But that's a great. I love hearing that because you like when you hear guys that you admire being nice. It seems like Scully's I would think he's a good guy too, right? He seems like a good man.
He's just so sweet, and he's so good, and what he does to work by himself and cover an entire game, and with the preparation and the stories and the way he weaves it in, it's a different way. It's a different way of broadcasting. You've got the West Coast guys that listen to Scully. You got the Midwest guys that listen to Harry and my dad. You got the East Coast guys that listen to Mel Allen or Marv Albert or whatever. And so you have different ways of doing it. And those are the different schools across the country that people listen to.
Marv Albert used to do a really great, subtle thing when he was doing Knick games. If a guy who wasn't really good made a good play, he would have this little surprise in his voice. He was surprised they did something good. That was so subtle, but it was like so insulting too, and real edgy. But and every time he did it, me and my cousin figured out he would do it. It was so great because again, subtlety. He didn't have to say this guy sucks and he just did something great. He would just seem a little surprised. And again, Eddie Lee Wilkins on the Knicks, not a great player, but like he would do something great, and Albert would go like, Ewing kicks it inside, the Vanderway inside. Eddie Lee Wilkins gets on the scoreboard. Okay, you're the best guy to ask this. You've seen every great team in the league this year doing the games. Give me your thoughts and maybe a prediction for what's going to happen Sunday.
First thing, and I don't know if you know it, both head coaches are brothers. Is that crazy?
No, we haven't covered that yet.
No, yeah. So start with that.
Yeah.
I love San Francisco.
Okay.
And I've talked to people whose opinion I respect more than my own, who like Baltimore. But I've seen San Francisco throughout the postseason. I did all those games. I think they're good now. I think they're going to be good for years. They can beat you in a lot of different ways. Kaepernick can throw it. He can run it. They can run it normal with Gore. They can run this read option stuff. They've got a good defense. I just think they're going to be too hard to beat.
See, I agree with you. I think, Lewis is older, Reed's older, and Kaepernick and Gore are going to get in that secondary and run around like crazy. I think it might even be a blowout. If people think I'm crazy, I'm thinking like 38-10 Niners.
Really?
I don't know. If I was a gambling man still, I would do that. But if I put a $5 bet down tonight, by tomorrow at noon, I'd be running guns to Cuba. So. Andrew, do you follow it enough to give you gutsy enough here to give a prediction?
I'm
or
a
what?
perverse sports geek.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and sad, as much as I love the Ravens story this year, all those locker room looks, they are a fantastic team, and the emotion that gets carried to bring both these teams all the way through the season is staggering. But I do really think the difference is actually going to be the San Francisco defense. I think no one's really talking about that. I think they've been playing better recently.
Yeah, their own number 52. How about that? Yeah.
And I think that they're ready to really buckle down. I think they owe themselves that kind of game. And I think San Francisco is going to go out ahead early in this one. 17-3, 17-7 at the half, and I think that they go on. The final score will probably look 28-21, but it'll probably be not as close as the score.
Look at that. I mean, and he makes Vietnamese street meat. That's it. I mean,
I do.
Vietnamese street meat. That's my new Twitter handle.